Welcome to Heartfelt Revenge Stories. I'm Elena. I'm 27 years old. And my parents told every single employer in this town that I was a criminal. Let that sink in for a moment. For 3 whole years I couldn't land a job anywhere. Not a single one. And it wasn't because I wasn't qualified, oh no. I graduated top of my class with a 3.8 GPA in finance. I had glowing letters of recommendation from my professors. I had awards, certifications, everything you could want in a candidate. But none of that mattered. Because my father, Richard Blackwell, made it his personal mission to tell everyone who would listen that his daughter was a thief. Maybe now you'll understand respect, he told me, standing in his leather-appointed study with that smug look on his face. He thought he'd broken me. He really did. 3 years of rejection after rejection. 3 years of watching me work at jobs I was overqualified for while he laughed about it at dinner parties. 3 years of waiting for me to come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. But here's what he didn't know. He had no idea about the envelope. He had no idea what my grandmother had set in motion 17 years ago. And he definitely had no idea that the CEO of Sterling Investments was waiting for me. Please subscribe and like this video and listen to my story till the end and let me know which city you're listening from. That way I can see how far my story has traveled. Now let me take you back. Back 3 years to the exact moment I discovered what my own parents had done to me. The moment everything I thought I knew about family shattered into a million pieces. The Blackwell family looked absolutely perfect from the outside. Picture perfect, really. My father, Richard Blackwell, owned the most successful architectural firm in 3 counties. Our house, this gorgeous colonial estate, sat on 5 acres with gardens that required a full-time groundskeeper. The garage held his Mercedes S-Class, my mother's Range Rover, and my older brother Nathan's Porsche, which was a graduation gift for finishing his MBA. My mother, Victoria, played her role flawlessly. Wedgwood china at every Sunday dinner. Fresh orchids delivered weekly. A smile so practiced it could have been painted on. Never a hair out of place, never a crack in the facade. And Nathan, 4 years older than me. The golden child. The chosen one. He'd been groomed to take over Dad's firm since he was old enough to hold a drafting pencil. Everything he touched turned to gold. Everything I touched got questioned, criticized, torn apart. Growing up, I learned fast that daughters occupied a very different space in the Blackwell household. When Nathan wanted to study architecture in Italy for a summer, Dad wrote a check for $15,000 without blinking. When I asked about a similar program 2 years later, he actually laughed in my face. "What for?" he said, not even looking up from his newspaper. "You'll get married eventually. That's what daughters do. Save me the expense." So I went to state college. 45 minutes away. Lived at home, commuted every single day. Watched my dreams get smaller and smaller. Family dinners were always the same. The entire conversation revolved around Nathan. His projects, his promotions, his brilliant future. I sat at the end of that long mahogany table, passing dishes, clearing plates, being invisible while Dad carved the roast and dispensed wisdom to his son. "A man's legacy is built through his work," Dad would say, pointing his fork at Nathan like a sword. "Remember that, son. That's what matters." He never once pointed that fork at me. When I was 17, I overheard something I've never forgotten. They were in the kitchen. Their voices were low, but I'd paused in the hallway and the walls were thin. "Daughters don't need to achieve, Victoria," my father said, his tone so casual it made my stomach turn. "They need to learn how to manage a household. Elena will marry well. That's her job. That's her purpose." I stood frozen in that hallway, my book bag weighing down my shoulder. My acceptance letter to the honors program crumpled in my hand. That was the first time I truly understood. In my father's eyes, I wasn't a person with dreams or ambitions or potential. I was an asset. Something to be managed, controlled, eventually traded for connections or business deals. The summer before I started college, my parents gave me a credit card. "For necessities," Mom said, sliding it across the kitchen counter. Her manicured nails clicked against the marble. "Books, supplies, whatever you need for your studies." Dad nodded from behind his Wall Street journal. "Don't go crazy with it. But you're covered." I was 19. Eager to prove I could be responsible, that I could be trusted. I used that card exactly as they'd instructed. Textbooks for my finance courses. A A used laptop from the campus technology sale. Notebooks, calculators, a graphing tool for statistics. Nothing frivolous. Nothing unnecessary. The total over 4 months came to $1,400. When the statement arrived, Dad absolutely exploded. I remember that dining room. The crystal chandelier casting sharp shadows. The way Mom's face went completely pale as Dad slammed that paper down on the table so hard the china rattled. $1,400. He was standing now, veins bulging in his neck, his face turning this alarming shade of purple. Who gave you permission to spend this much? You did, I said, and oh, my voice was so much smaller than I wanted it to be. You said it was for school supplies. You said I was covered. I said necessities, Elena. Not a shopping spree. Richard, Mom murmured weakly. The textbooks were expensive this semester, you know how it is. Stay out of this, Victoria. He whirled back to me and I actually flinched. You will pay back every single cent. Every single cent. Or you can find somewhere else to live. Your choice. I worked 3 part-time jobs for 9 months. Campus library on weekdays. Coffee shop on weekends. Tutoring whenever I could squeeze it in. I paid back every dollar. Kept every single receipt. Documented every payment like I was preparing for an audit. But the debt wasn't the only cost, oh no. Working 30 hours a week meant I couldn't take full course loads. I had to stretch my degree over 6.5 years instead of 4. 2.5 extra years of tuition that Dad refused to contribute another penny toward. 2.5 extra years of commuting from home. 2.5 extra years of being reminded constantly that I was a burden. A disappointment. A waste of resources. I thought it was over when I made that last payment. I really did. I thought he'd forget, move on, let it go. But my father, my father had a memory like an elephant and a grudge like a scorpion. Mom found me crying in my room that night after the explosion. She sat on the edge of my bed, stroked my hair with those cold, perfectly manicured fingers. Your father just wants to teach you the value of money, sweetie, she whispered. He loves you. You know he does. Don't be angry with him. I wanted so badly to believe her. God, I wanted to believe that this was love, that this was normal, that every family operated this way. That was my mistake. The only person who ever made me feel like I actually mattered was my grandmother. Catherine Sterling wasn't soft. She wasn't the cookie-baking, warm hugs type of grandmother. She built a furniture empire from absolutely nothing. Started with a single showroom in 1975, expanded to 14 locations across 4 states, then sold the entire operation when she turned 67 and retired with enough money to never worry about anything again. She was sharp, practical, fierce, and she saw things other people deliberately ignored, including what was happening in her daughter's marriage. I spent summers with Grandma Catherine when I was young. Her house always smelled like jasmine and old leather-bound books. She taught me to read financial statements before I was 13. Showed me how compound interest worked using her own investment portfolios as examples. Knowledge is freedom, Elena, she'd say, tapping her temple with one long finger. No one can take what's in here. No one. She watched my father carefully during family gatherings. I noticed the way her eyes would narrow when he dismissed my opinions. The way her jaw would tighten when Nathan got praised for breathing while I got criticized for existing. One afternoon I was 16. We were sitting on her porch watching the sunset paint her garden gold and orange. Out of nowhere she took my hand. Elena, she said quietly, seriously, I want you to remember something. I looked at her. Her eyes were intense in a way I hadn't seen before. Almost urgent. I've already prepared for your future. When the time comes, you'll understand. You'll know what to do. Prepared what, Grandma? She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Your father can't control everything, darling. Neither can your mother. Someday you'll need help they won't give you. When that day comes, and it will come, you'll be ready. I didn't understand. I was 16. I thought she was being dramatic, maybe a little paranoid. 4 years ago, Grandma Catherine passed away. She was 79. I didn't know then that she'd left me something far more valuable than money or jewelry or property. She'd left me a way out. A door my father couldn't lock. An escape route he'd never see coming. I graduated summa cum laude with my degree in finance. 3.8 GPA. Dean's List every single semester. A professor who'd worked at Goldman Sachs wrote me a recommendation letter that called me one of the most naturally gifted financial minds I've encountered in 20 years of teaching. For the first time in my entire life, I had something that belonged to me. Credentials nobody could dismiss or take away. Proof that I was capable, talented, worthy. The graduation ceremony was on a Saturday in June. I walked across that stage in my cap and gown, diploma clutched in my sweaty hands, and I scanned the crowd for my family. They were there. Third row. But they weren't watching me. Dad and Mom flanked Nathan, and all three of them were deep in conversation, heads together laughing about something. When my name was called, not one of them looked up. Not one. Only Grandma's empty seat in my heart acknowledged the moment. Afterward, Dad found me outside the auditorium. "Nice job," he said in that flat tone he used for the mailman or the guy who washed his car. "Listen, I've got a proposition for you." My heart lifted just a little. Maybe he finally saw my value. Maybe finally. "Come work at the firm. We need someone to handle accounts receivable. The position is unpaid for the first 18 months. He continued, like this was completely reasonable. "Consider it an apprenticeship. You'll live at home. Help your mother with household management. Learn the business from the ground up. In a few years, when Nathan takes over as partner, you'll be useful to him. Unpaid. Living at home. Useful to Nathan." I took a breath. "I appreciate the offer, Dad. I really do. But I'd like to try finding work independently first. Get some outside experience, you know?" His face didn't change. Not one muscle. But something behind his eyes went absolutely ice cold. "Fine," he said very, very softly. "Try it your way then." He turned and walked back to the car where Mom and Nathan were waiting. None of them looked back. Not once. I stood alone in that parking lot, still holding my diploma, and I told myself I'd made the right choice. I told myself I was being smart, independent, strong. I had absolutely no idea that his silence was a declaration of war. And that the war was about to cost me everything. What happened next changed everything. My father's revenge was more calculated and cruel than I ever imagined. Part 2 is where things get really dark. You won't believe what he did. The rejection letters started within 2 weeks. First came Morrison and Associates, the accounting firm downtown. I'd had a fantastic interview. The hiring manager, this nice woman named Patricia, had smiled warmly, shaken my hand, told me I was exactly what they were looking for. "We'll be in touch very soon," she'd said. "I'm really excited about this." 3 days later, "We've decided to pursue other candidates." Okay, fine. Not every interview works out, right? I applied to Regional Trust Bank next. Another great interview. The finance director asked thoughtful questions about my thesis on risk assessment. We talked for 45 minutes. He walked me to the elevator personally. 2 days later. "Thank you for your interest, but we're moving forward with someone else." Then the insurance company. Then the property management firm. Then the medical billing office. Then the credit union. Then the investment group. 19 applications. 19 interviews. 19 rejections. I started spiraling, questioning everything about myself. Maybe my resume wasn't strong enough. Maybe I'd said something wrong, something off-putting. Maybe I was overestimating my abilities. Maybe I wasn't as smart as I thought I was. I spent sleepless nights revising my cover letters, practicing interview answers in the bathroom mirror, reading career advice articles until my eyes burned and my head pounded. Nothing changed. The rejections kept coming. One afternoon, I walked into Sterling Financial Group for what felt like my 25th interview. The HR manager, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and elegant gray hair, listened to all my answers, nodded along, seemed genuinely impressed. Then she paused, put down her pen, looked at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. "Miss Blackwell," she said slowly, carefully, like she was choosing each word with surgical precision. "I'm going to tell you something I probably shouldn't." My stomach clenched. "Okay. You seem like a lovely young woman. Very qualified. Very professional." She hesitated, and I could see the internal struggle on her face. "But I think you should talk to your father." "My father? Why?" She pressed her lips together, clearly uncomfortable. "I can't say more than that. Just, Ask him. Ask him why no one in this town will hire you." She stood, signaling the interview was over. I drove home with my hands shaking so badly on the steering wheel I had to pull over twice. A cold certainty was forming in my chest. Something I didn't want to believe. Something too awful to be true. But I had to know. That night I confronted my father. And what he told me, oh God, what he told me shattered whatever fragments of family I'd been clinging to. I found him in his study, sitting behind that massive imported mahogany desk, a glass of single malt scotch sweating on a leather coaster beside him. The room smelled like expensive tobacco and old money. "Dad, I need to talk to you." He didn't look up from his architectural plans. "Make it quick. I'm busy. Why can't I get a job?" That made him look up. And I swear I saw a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. In that moment I knew. "You called them." I whispered, my voice barely audible. "You called all of them. Every single one." He leaned back in his leather chair. Swirling his scotch like this was the most casual conversation in the world. "I told them the truth," he said simply. "What truth?" "That you're a thief." He said it so casually, so matter-of-factly, like he was commenting on the weather. "That you stole $1,400 from your own family. That you can't be trusted with financial responsibility." The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. The room spun. I paid that back. Every single cent. You know I paid it back." He shrugged, one elegant shoulder rising and falling. "That's not how I remember it. Dad." My voice cracked. Tears burned behind my eyes. "Those were textbooks. You told me I could. What I remember," he interrupted, his voice hardening, "is my daughter stealing from me. And I think potential employers deserve to know exactly what kind of person they'd be hiring. Don't you think that's fair?" My mother appeared in the doorway, twisting her hands together like she always did when things got uncomfortable. Something flickered across her face. Guilt maybe. Or the ghost of the woman she used to be before 30 years with Richard Blackwell wore her down to nothing. "Richard, maybe we should." "Victoria, this is between me and Elena." She flinched. Just flinched and stayed silent. For a split second her eyes met mine. And I saw it. Clear as day. She knew this was wrong. She knew. But she looked away, retreating into her habitual silence like it was armor. That hurt almost more than Dad's cruelty. He was a monster, yes. But she was a witness who chose not to see. Who chose not to speak. Who chose him over me every single time. I stared at my father through tears I refused to let fall. "Why?" I managed. "Why would you do this to me?" He stood slowly, walked around the desk with deliberate, measured steps, stopped in front of me, close enough that I could smell the scotch on his breath, see the cold satisfaction in his eyes. "Because you needed to learn respect," he said quietly, almost gently. "You turned down my very generous offer. You thought you could make it without this family." He paused. "Without me?" He smiled then. Actually smiled. "Maybe now you understand. You can't." "Come home, Elena," Mom said softly from the doorway, her voice pleading. "Work for your father. This can all go away. We can be a family again." I looked between them. My mother's desperate, pleading face. My father's cold, triumphant satisfaction. And I finally understood. This was never about respect or lessons or family values. This was about control. Pure absolute control. In a small town, gossip travels faster than wildfire and spreads wider than truth. Within weeks, I felt the shift everywhere I went. At the grocery store, neighbors who'd known me since I was in pigtails suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. At the community center where I used to volunteer, conversations would stop dead when I walked past. The woman at the dry cleaners who'd always asked about my studies and called me dear, started treating me like a stranger. Like I was invisible. The whispers were everywhere. In line at the pharmacy, at the post office, outside church. "Did you hear about Richard's daughter? Such a shame. The family's devastated. They tried to help her. You know? She just wouldn't listen. Some people just can't be saved." My father had been strategic. Calculated. He hadn't just called employers. Oh no. He'd seeded this story throughout his entire network like he was planting a garden of destruction. Golf buddies. Chamber of Commerce colleagues. neighbors at dinner parties, the Rotary Club, his architectural firm's clients. The narrative was always the same: troubled daughter, theft problem, family trying desperately to cope with her issues, good people dealing with a bad situation. He never outright lied. He was too smart for that. He just told his version, his truth, his interpretation. And in a town where Blackwell Architecture had designed half the commercial buildings and a third of the upscale homes, his version was the only one that mattered. His word was gospel. Nathan made it so much worse. I ran into him at the coffee shop one morning, one of my old part-time jobs from college. He was with friends, guys I vaguely recognized from his fraternity days, all of them in expensive workout gear, laughing too loud, taking up too much space. "Hey, little sister," he called out, loud enough for everyone in the shop to hear. "Still looking for work? Dad mentioned he might have an opening for you." He paused for effect, grinning. "Oh wait, that's right. You'd probably steal from the petty cash." His friends absolutely howled with laughter. I left my coffee on the counter untouched, walked out with my face burning, my hands shaking, my throat tight with humiliation. At home that night, I looked at my bank account. $2,800 in savings. Rent was due in 2 weeks on my tiny studio apartment. At this rate, I had maybe 3 months before I'd be completely broke. 3 months before I'd have no choice but to crawl back to my father's house, defeated, broken, and accept whatever crumbs of dignity he decided to throw my way. I couldn't let that happen. I wouldn't. The Riverside Inn sat on the edge of town, a modest hotel that mostly served traveling salespeople and families visiting the state park 30 miles away. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't prestigious. But it was hiring. The job listing was blunt. Housekeeping staff needed. No experience necessary. No references required. No references required. Those 3 words were a lifeline. I applied online at 3 in the morning when the shame felt less sharp, when I could almost convince myself this was temporary, this was just a stepping stone, this wasn't failure. 2 days later, I stood in the employee break room filling out paperwork. The manager was a woman named Sandra Martinez, mid-40s. No nonsense. She had the kind of tired eyes that suggested she'd seen plenty of hard luck stories walk through her door, and she'd stopped being surprised by any of them. She looked at my application, then at me, then back at the application. "Finance degree," she said flatly. "GPA 3.8. Dean's List. And you want to clean hotel rooms?" "Yes, ma'am." Why? I could have lied. Made up something about wanting hospitality experience, about building character, about appreciating hard work from the ground up. But I was so tired of lies. "Because no one else will hire me," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "And I need to pay rent." She studied me for a long moment. I wondered if she'd heard the rumors, if she'd call my father for a reference, if this door would slam shut too, leaving me with nothing. Instead, she nodded once. Sharp. Decisive. "I don't care what people say about you, Miss Blackwell. I care whether you show up on time and do your job properly." She slid a uniform across the desk. Pale blue polyester. The kind that wrinkles if you look at it wrong. "Shift starts at 6 a.m. Don't be late." I took that uniform with hands that weren't quite steady. "Thank you." I managed past the lump in my throat. "You won't regret this." She almost smiled. Almost. "We'll see. Minimum wage. Early morning shifts. Scrubbing toilets and changing sheets and mopping floors while people who used to respect me pretended not to see me in the hallways. But it was work. It was survival. It was mine. And my father couldn't touch it. 7 months into my housekeeping job, my family decided to have dinner at the Riverside Inn. I don't believe in coincidences. Not anymore. It was a Friday evening. I was pushing my supply cart down the service corridor, my back aching from hauling mattresses all day, when I heard a very familiar laugh echoing through the ventilation system. My father's booming, self-satisfied bark. The sound of a man who thought he owned the world. I froze, pressed myself against the wall, peeked around the corner very, very carefully. There they were, being seated in the hotel restaurant. Dad in his charcoal Tom Ford suit that cost more than I made in 2 months. Mom in pearls and Chanel. Nathan checking his phone, already bored. The hostess was leading them to a window table right in my direct sight line. I should have stayed hidden. Should have switched floors, asked another housekeeper to cover this section. Should have made myself invisible like I'd learned to do so well. But before I could move, my father's eyes found me. The cart. The uniform. The yellow rubber gloves on my hands. The name tag pinned to my chest. His face split into the widest grin I'd ever seen. Pure malicious joy. "Well, well, well," he said loudly, nudging my mother, pointing directly at me. "Victoria, look. Our daughter found her calling after all." Mom's face flickered with something. Shame maybe. Or discomfort. But she said nothing. Nathan laughed. Actually laughed. "Hey, Elena," my brother called across the restaurant, loud enough for every single guest to hear. "You missed a spot in room 304. Several diners turned to look. Some of them recognized me. I saw the whispers start immediately. Saw the phones come out. Saw my humiliation becoming tomorrow's gossip. I stood there in my wrinkled polyester uniform, holding a toilet brush, while my family watched from their white tablecloth table with their crystal water glasses and their designer watches in their complete, utter certainty that they'd won. My father raised his wine glass toward me. "A mock toast. Maybe now," he said, just loud enough to carry. "You'll finally learn to respect us, sweetheart." I didn't cry. I didn't run. I didn't give him that satisfaction. I just turned around very slowly and pushed my cart back down the corridor. But something hardened inside me that night. Something crystallized into absolute steel. I remembered Grandma's words. "When the time comes, you'll know." And I wondered. When? When would the time come? 3 weeks later, I found something that changed everything. An old voicemail I'd never heard. A message that revealed my grandmother's secret plan. Part 3 is where the pieces start falling into place. 3 weeks after the restaurant incident, I was cleaning out a box of old belongings from my closet, trying desperately to find things to sell to make next month's rent, when I found my old phone. The screen was shattered from when I dropped it 2 years ago. The battery had been dead for who knows how long. I'd upgraded and completely forgotten about it. For some reason I still can't explain, I plugged it in. The phone buzzed to life, and notifications flooded the screen like a dam breaking. Old text messages from college friends I'd lost touch with. Spam emails about sales and subscriptions. And one voicemail. From 4 years ago. Right after Grandma died. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pressed play with shaking fingers. "Miss Blackwell, this is Walter Chun from Chan and Associates Law Firm." The voice was professional, measured, careful. "I'm calling regarding the estate of Catherine Sterling. There are some documents pertaining to her will that require your immediate attention. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience. This is time-sensitive." The message ended. 4 years. I'd missed this call 4 years ago. I remembered that time. The fog of grief after Grandma's funeral. I hadn't been checking messages regularly. I'd been drowning in loss and family obligations and trying to finish my degree. I'd assumed her estate was straightforward. Dad had told us she'd left everything to various charities with small monetary gifts for each grandchild. Nothing significant, he'd said dismissively at the funeral reception. Your grandmother was always sentimental about causes. Left most of it to animal shelters and libraries. I'd believed him. Why wouldn't I? I grabbed my current phone with trembling hands and dialed the law firm immediately. Chun and Associates, how may I direct your call? I'm trying to reach Walter Chun. He contacted me several years ago about my grandmother's estate. Catherine Sterling. A pause. Keyboard clicking. I'm sorry, Mr. Chun retired 2 years ago due to health issues. His cases were transferred to various attorneys within the firm. Okay, can you tell me who has my grandmother's case now? Another pause. More clicking. I see a note here that Mr. Chun attempted to reach you multiple times. The file indicates. She paused. The file indicates the calls went unanswered, and subsequently your father, Richard Blackwell, contacted our office and informed us you weren't interested in pursuing the matter. My blood turned to absolute ice. My father said what? I'm just reading the notes, ma'am. It says, family representative confirmed beneficiary declined further contact regarding inheritance. Dad had intercepted it. He told them I wasn't interested. He'd made sure I never knew. Can you tell me where the case was transferred? Who has it now? I'd need to check our records more thoroughly. Can you leave your contact information? I gave her my number, my email, everything. But something in my gut told me I wouldn't hear back. The trail had gone deliberately cold. But now I knew. There was something in Grandma's estate. Something Dad hadn't told me about. Something he very much didn't want me to find. A month crawled by like it had weights attached to it. Then my father called. I almost didn't answer. I stared at his name on my screen for 5 rings, my finger hovering over the decline button. But something made me pick up. Maybe desperation. Maybe some tiny pathetic hope that things could change. Elena. His voice was warm. Too warm. False warm. How are you doing, sweetheart? Fine, Dad. Listen, I've been thinking. This situation has gone on long enough, don't you think? Your mother misses you terribly. I miss you. He paused, letting that sink in. Come home. I stared at the water stain on my ceiling, the one my landlord refused to fix. Come home and do what? Work at the firm. We genuinely need help with financial management. I'll pay you. Not much at first, but something reasonable. You'll live with us, save money. Get back on your feet properly. It sounded almost reasonable. Almost. And the job hunting? The things you told everyone about me. Water under the bridge, he said easily. You come home, I'll make some calls. Clear things up. People will forget. People always forget. And if I don't? His tone shifted. The warmth drained out like someone had pulled a plug. Then you can keep scrubbing toilets until you wise up. Your choice, Elena. But think carefully. This offer won't last forever. He hung up. That night, Mom called separately. Her voice was soft, pleading, practiced. Please, Elena. Just come home. Stop being so stubborn. Your father only wants what's best for you. He loves you, you know he does. Does he, Mom? Or does he just want to control me? That's so unfair. He's your father. He's trying to help you. His way of helping is destroying my life. Silence. Then very quietly. You're making this harder than it needs to be, sweetheart. Just give in. It'll be easier for everyone. I hung up without saying goodbye. Marcus texted an hour later. Just give up already, sis. You're embarrassing yourself and the rest of us. Nobody respects a martyr. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my laptop and started applying to jobs far outside our town. Places where the Blackwell name meant absolutely nothing. Chicago, Seattle, Denver, Austin. Cities where I could disappear and start over. I had to escape. Had to get out before the trap closed completely. 2 weeks later, I learned exactly what my father had planned for me. I was working the late shift at the Riverside Inn, restocking supplies in the second-floor closet, when voices drifted up from the restaurant below. The old ventilation ducts carried sound in weird, unpredictable ways. Architectural flaw the manager always complained about. But then I heard my father's name. And then I heard mine. I crept closer to the vent, pressing my ear against the metal grate, my heart starting to hammer. I'm telling you, James, the timing is absolutely perfect. Dad's voice, jovial, confident, pleased with himself. Your son's looking to settle down. My daughter needs stability and direction. We merge the families, we merge the businesses. Blackwell Architecture and Patterson Construction. We dominate the entire region. A second voice. Older. Gruff. She's the one who's been causing all the trouble though, right? The theft situation. That's handled, Dad said dismissively. She's almost ready to come home. Another few months of this. He laughed. A cruel sound. Another few months and she'll agree to anything, including meeting your boy. My blood turned to ice. My hands started shaking so badly I had to grip the wall. So what, an arranged marriage? The other man sounded amused. I prefer strategic alliance, Dad said smoothly. But yes, she'll do what she's told. By the time I'm finished with her, she won't have any other options. The other man chuckled. Richard, you're something else. All right, let's talk numbers for the merger. Their conversation shifted to business details, profit margins, contracts. I didn't hear any of it. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the floor of that supply closet, surrounded by toilet paper and industrial bleach, my entire body shaking. He wasn't just trying to control me. He wasn't just trying to break me. He was planning to sell me. An arranged marriage. A business arrangement sealed with his daughter's future. Like I was property. Like I was livestock. I thought about Grandma Catherine. Her warning. Her promise that she'd prepared something. I didn't know what she'd left me or how to find it. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I could not stay in this town. Not for one more month. Not for one more week. No matter what it cost me. I started applying to companies with renewed desperation. Places I'd never visited. Cities I'd only seen in movies. Anywhere far enough that a small-town architect's gossip couldn't reach. Chicago. San Francisco. Boston. Atlanta. Miami. The rejections piled up like snow. Some companies wanted references I couldn't provide. Others questioned the 3-year gap in my employment history. How do you explain my father sabotaged my career because I wouldn't be his unpaid servant and future bargaining chip? I tried honesty a few times. It never went well. That sounds like a very complicated family situation, one HR manager said diplomatically, which was corporate speak for, "We don't want your drama anywhere near our company." After weeks of nothing but rejection, I'd almost given up hope completely. Then the email arrived. Subject: Interview invitation, Sterling Investments. I had to read it 4 times before I believed it was real. Dear Miss Blackwell, we have reviewed your application materials and would like to invite you for an in-person interview at our headquarters. Please note that this interview will be conducted personally by our CEO, Mr. James Harrison. This is an unusual request, but Mr. Harrison has expressed specific interest in meeting with you. Please confirm your availability at your earliest convenience. Sterling Investments. I'd applied on an absolute whim. They were one of the largest financial firms in 4 states. Way above my experience level. I'd never expected a response, let alone an interview. And the CEO wanted to meet me personally? That didn't make any sense. CEOs didn't interview entry-level candidates. Ever. I almost deleted the email, convinced it was spam or some elaborate cruel joke someone was playing. But something made me pause. Grandma's voice in my head clear as a bell. When the time comes, you'll know. I hit reply before I could talk myself out of it. Dear Sir or Madam, I am available at your earliest convenience. 2 days later, I was on a bus heading to the city, wearing a second-hand charcoal suit I'd found at Goodwill, with $63 in my wallet and absolutely no idea what was waiting for me. The interview changed my life in ways I never could have imagined. What was in Grandma's envelope? What had she planned all those years ago? Part 4 reveals everything. The night before my interview, I stayed in a budget motel near the bus station. The room smelled like industrial cleaning solution and old cigarettes. The mattress sagged dramatically in the middle. There was a stain on the ceiling I tried very hard not to think about. But it was clean enough. It was cheap. And it was mine. Tomorrow might change everything. I hung my Goodwill suit in the tiny bathroom, letting the steam from the shower work out the wrinkles. I polished my only pair of decent heels, black, scuffed at the toes, but presentable if nobody looked too closely. I practiced interview answers until after midnight. Tell me about yourself. Deep breath. I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in finance. I'm detail-oriented, analytical, and passionate about creating ethical financial strategies that build long-term value. Why do you want to work at Sterling Investments? Steady voice. Your company's reputation for principled financial practices aligns perfectly with my personal values. I want to grow with an organization that prioritizes integrity over short-term profits. Why the 3-year gap in your employment history? That one I practiced 17 different ways. None of them felt right. How do you explain this kind of sabotage without sounding bitter? Without sounding like you're blaming everyone else for your problems? Sandra, my manager at the hotel, had given me the day off without a single question. Go get your real life back, she'd said, pressing a crumpled $20 bill into my hand despite my protests. You don't belong here, Elena. You never did. I'd cried in the break room. She'd pretended not to notice. As I lay in that sagging motel bed, staring at that mysterious ceiling stain, I thought about Grandma, about her promise, about the lawyer's call I'd missed. What had she left me? Why did this CEO want to meet me personally? Was this real, or was I setting myself up for another devastating disappointment? I fell asleep with questions circling my mind like restless birds. In the morning, I put on my second-hand suit, took the deepest breath of my life, and walked toward whatever was waiting. I didn't know it yet, but Grandma was about to keep her promise. The morning of my interview, my phone rang. I was walking toward the Sterling Investments building, this absolutely stunning tower of glass and steel that made me feel incredibly small in my thrift store suit. When I saw the caller ID, Dad, my thumb hovered over the ignore button, but something made me answer. Elena. His voice was flat, cold, dangerous. I hear you have an interview today. My stomach dropped straight through the sidewalk. How do you know that? Marcus follows your pathetic little social media accounts. Very careless of you, tagging your location at the bus station yesterday. Buying a ticket to the city. I'd made one post, one cautiously optimistic Instagram story about new beginnings, with a photo of the bus station. I hadn't mentioned Sterling Investments by name, hadn't mentioned anything specific. But Marcus must have checked which financial firms were headquartered in that city. Cross-referenced with recent job postings. Done his research. Stupid. So stupid of me. It doesn't matter, Dad. This is none of your business. I know people in finance, Elena. The industry is smaller than you think, especially at the executive level. He let that hang in the air like a threat. One phone call. That's all it takes. You wouldn't. Try me. Or better yet, turn around right now. Come home. Last chance. I was standing on the sidewalk 60 feet from the building that might save my life. And my father was trying to burn it down from 400 miles away. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. You're done, sis. Dad already made the call. Enjoy the bus ride home. LOL. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone. I looked up at the Sterling Investments tower. 30 floors of glass reflecting the morning sun like a promise. Maybe he'd already poisoned this well too. Maybe I was walking into another rejection, another humiliation, another door slammed in my face. But I'd come too far to turn back. I silenced my phone, straightened my second-hand suit, and walked through those front doors. Whatever was waiting for me, I'd face it standing up. The lobby of Sterling Investments was everything my life wasn't. Marble floors polished to an absolute mirror shine. A 4-story atrium with contemporary art installations suspended on nearly invisible cables. People in designer suits crossing purposefully toward elevators, their expensive shoes clicking sharp rhythms against the stone. I approached the reception desk, acutely aware of my scuffed heels and second-hand blazer, and the small run in my stockings I'd tried to stop with clear nail polish. Elena Blackwell, I said, trying to sound confident. I have an interview. The receptionist, blonde, immaculate, wearing a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire month's rent, typed something into her computer. Then she looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. Yes, Miss Blackwell. You're expected. A pause. Mr. Harrison will see you personally in his office. 30th floor. The CEO's office. The actual CEO. That's correct? I managed. Completely correct. She handed me a visitor badge. Take the private elevator on your left. His executive assistant will meet you. I walked toward that elevator in an absolute daze. This didn't make sense. CEOs didn't conduct entry-level interviews. There had to be some mistake. Or my father's call had worked and this was some elaborate setup. Some humiliation I couldn't see coming. The elevator rose silently. 30 floors in what felt like seconds. The doors opened onto a reception area that screamed money in the quietest, most elegant way possible. Original artwork on the walls. Furniture that looked handcrafted by master craftsmen. Floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city that literally took my breath away. An executive assistant in a perfectly tailored charcoal dress approached. Miss Blackwell, Mr. Harrison is waiting for you. She led me down a hallway lined with photographs documenting the company's history. Awards. Milestones. Important people shaking hands at important events. She stopped at a heavy oak door. Go right in, she said, and something in her voice sounded almost kind. He's been expecting you for a very long time. Expecting me? For a long time? I pushed open the door, and everything I thought I knew about my life fell completely, utterly apart. James Harrison was standing by the windows when I entered. He was older than I'd expected. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. Silver hair at his temples. The kind of distinguished face that belonged on magazine covers. His suit was absolutely impeccable. His office was easily the size of my entire apartment. But what struck me most was his expression. He wasn't looking at me like a job candidate. He wasn't looking at me with the polite professional interest of an interviewer. He was looking at me like he'd been waiting for this exact moment for years. "Miss Blackwell." His voice was warm, genuine. Please sit down." I sat in the leather chair across from his desk, my heart absolutely hammering against my ribs. "Mr. Harrison, I'm not entirely sure why." He held up one hand gently. "Before we begin, I need to give you something." He walked to a safe built into the wall. A vintage Mosler, polished brass and chrome, the kind you see in old movies. He entered a combination with careful, practiced movements. "This should explain everything." He pulled out a yellowed envelope. I literally couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. The envelope was thick, substantial, sealed with deep red wax that had aged to amber over time. On the front, in handwriting I would recognize anywhere in the world, were these words: "Only to be opened when Catherine Sterling has passed away and her granddaughter Elena Blackwell comes to Sterling Investments for an interview." The date beneath it: 17 years ago. I was 10 years old when she wrote this. "Your grandmother," James said very softly, placing the envelope in my trembling hands, "was the very first person who ever believed in me." He sat down across from me. 22 years ago I was nobody. A kid with a business plan, big dreams, and absolutely no capital. Every bank in 3 states had turned me down. I was days away from giving up completely. He paused, his eyes distant with memory. "Catherine Sterling wrote me a check for $300,000 when every single financial institution had said no. She made me promise just one thing." He met my eyes. She said, "Someday a young woman named Elena Blackwell will need a position. She might apply to your company. She will apply to your company. When she does, give her this envelope." I set up a flag in our HR system 17 years ago. Your name, your social security number, your date of birth. The moment your application came through our system, I was notified immediately. 17 years. He'd been waiting 17 years for an application that might never come. Tears were absolutely blurring my vision. "She told me," he continued quietly, "someday my granddaughter will need a safe place. When she comes to you, and she will, give her this." He paused. I didn't understand then. But I think. He looked at me with something like compassion. "I think I understand now. Grandma," I whispered, staring at that envelope. You knew 17 years ago." My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I broke the wax seal. James stepped back, giving me privacy, space, respect. The office was silent except for the soft rustle of old paper and my unsteady breathing. Inside were 3 items. First, a letter. Handwritten on cream-colored stationery. Grandma's elegant, flowing script covering multiple pages. Second, a certificate. Official, notarized, bearing the Sterling Investments logo and a date from 22 years ago. I scanned the formal text and felt the entire room tilt violently. Certificate of stock ownership. Elena Marie Blackwell. 10% founding stake. Sterling Investments LLC. I read it twice. 3 times. 4 times. I don't understand," I whispered. James pulled up a chair beside me, sitting at my level instead of across from me. "When your grandmother invested in my company, she didn't want the shares in her name. She put them in an irrevocable trust for you. Her then 7-year-old granddaughter." He paused. "Legally, irrevocably yours. But why didn't anyone tell me? Why didn't I know?" "The trust was structured to remain completely silent until either Catherine passed away, or you came to this company seeking employment, whichever came first. She designed it very specifically that way." Another pause. "She wanted to make absolutely certain no one could take it from you. Not even your father." The third item was a small leather journal. Its pages yellowed and soft with age. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were notes. Dates. Observations. Spanning decades. November 1999. Richard screamed at Victoria about grocery spending for 40 minutes. Victoria cried in the bathroom for 2 hours afterward. April 2003. Richard refused to pay for Elena's art classes. Called them a waste of money for a daughter. September 2009. Richard forbade Elena from applying to out-of-state universities. Women don't need expensive educations. They need to learn their place. Page after page after page. She'd been watching, documenting, preparing, building my escape route one careful observation at a time. Your grandmother knew, James said very quietly, exactly what kind of man your father is. She couldn't stop him directly. The law doesn't work that way. Family dynamics don't work that way. He paused. So she built you an escape route instead. I was crying now. Couldn't stop. Tears streaming down my face, ruining what little makeup I'd put on. And I didn't care at all. She'd loved me this much. Had seen this coming. Had planned for it. James offered me tissues and stepped outside to give me privacy. I sat alone in his corner office, holding my grandmother's letter like it was made of the most fragile glass in the world. The letter revealed everything. Grandma's plan. Her love. Her final gift. Part 5 is where I finally confronted my father with the truth. I unfolded Grandma's letter with trembling hands, and her voice came through so clearly it was like she was sitting right beside me. My dearest Elena, if you're reading this, then I've left this world and you found your way to James Harrison exactly as I hoped you would. I'm so sorry I couldn't be there to give you this myself, to see your face, to hold you while you process everything. I want you to understand why I did what I did. I watched your mother marry Richard Blackwell 32 years ago. I saw the signs from the very beginning. The control disguised as protection. The cruelty disguised as discipline. The way he systematically diminished everyone around him to feel powerful. I begged Diane to leave before the wedding. I begged her again after the first year. After you were born. After Nathan. She refused every single time. She believed she could fix him. She believed love could change him. I couldn't save my daughter. But I swore on everything I held sacred that I would save you. From the moment you were born, I saw something in you, sweet girl. A spark that Richard couldn't extinguish no matter how hard he tried. You questioned him. You dreamed beyond his walls. You refused to be small. And I knew with absolute certainty that one day he would try to break you for it. So I built you an insurance policy. James Harrison was a young man with vision and integrity when I invested in his company. I put those shares in your name because I knew that Richard would eventually try to trap you. Financially, socially, emotionally. I wanted you to have a door he couldn't close. A way out he couldn't block. By now, those shares are worth more than enough to build your own life completely independent of anyone's control. Use them wisely, my darling girl. Build something that belongs entirely to you. And remember this, and remember it forever. You don't owe anyone your obedience. Not even family. Especially not family that treats love like a leash. I am so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. Even though I can't see it with my own eyes, I know it in my bones. I know it in my soul. Live free, Elena. That's all I ever wanted for you. That's all that matters. All my love forever and always, Grandma. I pressed that letter to my chest and absolutely wept. Sobbed. Ugly crying right there in that expensive office. When James returned, I had composed myself. Mostly. My eyes were red and swollen. My mascara was completely destroyed. But something inside me felt lighter than it had in years. Oh God, Grandma. Thank you. Thank you. I have to tell you something, James said, settling back into his chair with a serious expression. Your father called me this morning. I went cold all over. What did he say? The same thing he's apparently told everyone in your hometown. That you're a thief. That you stole from your family. That I absolutely shouldn't trust you with any financial responsibility. James's expression remained completely neutral, but I saw something flash in his eyes. He was very confident. Very persuasive. Very certain I would listen. And you? I listened, he said simply. And then I looked at the journal your grandmother left. Her documentation of his behavior spanning 3 decades. He met my gaze directly. And then I looked at the certificate that proves you own 10% of my company. One of our founding stakeholders. I stared at him. Miss Blackwell. Elena. Your father just tried to slander a major shareholder of Sterling Investments. One of our original investors, in fact. A small smile crossed his face. I don't think he's accustomed to that kind of miscalculation. He doesn't know, I whispered. About the shares. About any of this. No. Your grandmother was extremely specific about confidentiality. The trust was sealed. Your name doesn't appear in any public filings. It's held through a complex legal entity. He paused. There was absolutely no way for him to discover it. So when he called you this morning, he was trying to sabotage someone who on paper is technically one of your bosses. Essentially, yes. James leaned back and I swear he looked amused. I have to admit, in 22 years of business, I've never experienced anything quite like it. I thought about my father, smugly confident that he'd destroyed my last chance. About Marcus's gloating text. About Mom's desperate phone calls. They had no idea what was coming. For the first time in 3 years I smiled. Really truly smiled. James leaned forward with sudden energy. There's something I'd like to propose. I wiped my eyes, still clutching Grandma's letter like a lifeline. I'm listening. Next week, Sterling Investments hosts our annual charity gala. It's our biggest event of the year. Clients, investors, community leaders, politicians. Very high profile. He paused meaningfully. Your father will be there. My stomach clenched. He's invited? He invited himself, actually. He's been trying to network his way into architectural contracts with us for months. Seems to think his firm would make an excellent partner for our real estate development projects. James's tone was completely dry. I've been politely declining. So what are you proposing? I'd like to introduce you at the gala as our new senior financial analyst, a position you're more than qualified for. And as a founding shareholder of the company. He watched my face carefully. Your father will be in the room when he learns exactly who you are, what you own, what his daughter has become despite his best efforts to destroy her. I sat in silence for a long moment. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Wanted to picture Gerald's face when he realized his daughter, the one he tried to break, owned part of the company he'd been desperately courting. But another part hesitated. I don't want revenge, I said slowly, carefully. I don't want to humiliate him just to watch him suffer. I searched for the right words. That's not who I want to be. James nodded, completely unsurprised. Your grandmother said you'd say exactly that. He smiled gently, kindly. This isn't about revenge, Elena. It's about truth. You've spent 3 years being called a thief, a failure, a disgrace. Your father controls that narrative because no one's challenged it. No one stood up and said, that's not true. He stood, walked to the massive windows overlooking the city. The gala isn't about hurting him. It's about standing in the light. It's about letting people see who you really are. And letting your father's lies collapse under their own weight. He turned back to me. Truth is the best revenge. It's also the only revenge worth having. I thought about it. Really thought about it. And then I said, yes. Tell me in the comments. And if you've dealt with something similar, share your story. You're not alone. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. The Grand Meridian Hotel looked like something from an actual fairy tale. Crystal chandeliers dripping from 40-foot ceilings like frozen waterfalls. A live orchestra playing in the corner. Not a quartet, a full orchestra. Waiters in white gloves circulating with champagne and elaborate hors d'oeuvres. The guest list read like a who's who of regional power. Executives, politicians, philanthropists, old money and new money, and people who'd never had to think about money in their entire lives. I watched from a private room upstairs, waiting for my cue. The PR team at Sterling Investments had dressed me. Nothing ostentatious, nothing flashy. A simple navy sheath dress by Carolina Herrera. Elegant but understated. Diamond stud earrings, borrowed from the company's jewelry partner. My hair in a sleek chignon that had taken a professional stylist an hour to perfect. I looked professional, competent, successful. I didn't look like someone who'd been scrubbing toilets 4 days ago. Through the window, I spotted my family arriving. Richard entered first, chest puffed out, surveying the room like he owned it, like he owned everything. His charcoal Armani suit probably cost what I used to make in 4 months at the hotel. Mom trailed behind in Chanel, wearing that perfect practice smile, the one that never reached her eyes. Marcus was on his phone, looking bored already, probably texting someone about how tedious these events were. They didn't belong here, but they absolutely thought they did. I watched my father work the room, shaking hands, laughing too loud, positioning himself strategically near important-looking people, trying desperately to catch James Harrison's eye. The architectural contracts he'd been chasing, the business deals he thought would cement his legacy. He had absolutely no idea that in 20 minutes, everything would change. Ready? James's executive assistant appeared beside me. I took the deepest breath of my life, touched Grandma's letter in my clutch purse. Ready? Mr. Harrison will introduce you after his opening remarks. You'll enter through the side door, walk to the stage. Just like we practiced. She paused, studying my face with unexpected warmth. For what it's worth, everyone in this company knows what your father did, what he tried to do. And we're all so glad you're here. My throat tightened. Thank you, I managed. She nodded and disappeared. I stood alone, watching the crowd below, counting down the minutes until I could finally stand in the truth. I couldn't hear the conversation from my vantage point, but I could absolutely read the body language. Richard had cornered James near the bar. My father was leaning in, all practice charm, gesturing broadly with his champagne glass. James stood with his hands clasped, expression perfectly neutral, occasionally nodding. Then another executive joined them, a woman I recognized from the company website. Michelle something. Chief Operations Officer. She asked Richard something. He beamed, puffed up even more, clearly flattered by her interest. And then I could see it even from upstairs. His face shifted to something darker as he started talking about his family. His son, the heir, the perfect Nathan. And then his troubled daughter. The disappointment. The thief. I saw Michelle's expression change from polite interest to visible discomfort. She glanced at James with a look that clearly said, "Is this guy serious?" James said something back, calm and measured. Richard laughed. That hollow, confident laugh of a man who thought he was absolutely winning. He was telling them about me. About his troubled daughter who couldn't be trusted. Who'd stolen from her own family. Who was such a profound disappointment. My mother stood nearby, nodding along like she always did. The perfect supportive wife. Marcus was at the bar hitting on someone's daughter, completely oblivious. This was my family. This was what they did. This was who they were. I felt the old shame rising in my chest. That familiar burn of being reduced, dismissed, defined entirely by someone else's lies. But it was different now. Because now I had something they didn't know about. Now I had the truth. And the truth was about to set me free. Miss Blackwell. The assistant was back. Mr. Harrison is beginning his remarks. You'll be introduced in 5 minutes. I smoothed my dress. Touched Grandma's letter one final time. 5 minutes until Richard Blackwell learned exactly who his daughter really was. James took the microphone as the crowd gathered, conversations quieting to respectful attention. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining Sterling Investments' annual charity gala. I couldn't hear most of his speech through the door. Just fragments about community, philanthropy, gratitude for partnerships built over 2 decades, commitment to ethical financial practices. Then his voice shifted, became more personal. Before we continue with tonight's program, I'd like to introduce someone very special. Someone who represents the values this company was built on from day one. Integrity, perseverance, and the courage to stand alone when necessary. The assistant touched my arm gently. That's your cue. I stepped through the side door and into the ballroom. 300 faces turned toward me. I walked steadily, head high, shoulders back, toward the small stage where James waited. My heels clicked against the marble floor in a rhythm that sounded like confidence, like certainty, like freedom. The navy dress caught the light from those massive chandeliers. I didn't look at my father. Not yet. But oh, I felt the exact moment he saw me. A sharp intake of breath somewhere to my left. A muttered curse, low and vicious. The distinctive crash of a champagne flute shattering against marble. That was Marcus. I kept walking, one foot in front of the other. Eyes forward. Ladies and gentlemen, James continued, his voice warm and clear and carrying to every corner of that enormous room. Please welcome Sterling Investments' newest senior financial analyst and someone extraordinarily dear to this company's history, Miss Elena Blackwell." Polite applause rippled through the crowd like a wave. I reached the stage. James shook my hand firmly, leaning close to murmur, "You're doing perfectly. I'm so proud of you." I turned to face the audience. And finally, I let myself look at my father. Richard stood frozen near the bar. His face had gone completely white. His mouth hung open. He looked like someone had physically struck him. My mother had grabbed his arm, her knuckles bloodless against his expensive sleeve. Marcus was staring at the shattered glass at his feet, like he couldn't understand how it got there, like reality had suddenly stopped making sense. I smiled. Not vindictive, not cruel, just calm, just certain, just free. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and clear. "It's an absolute honor to be here." And then my father started moving toward me, his face twisted with rage. "Elena!" My father's voice cut through the murmur of the crowd like a knife. "What the hell do you think you're doing here?" He pushed past a waiter, nearly knocking an entire tray of champagne to the floor. People gasped, stepped back, created space for the spectacle. The room went dead silent. 300 people watching Richard Blackwell storm toward the stage, his face mottled with fury and disbelief. "Security!" he barked, looking around wildly. "Someone get security. This woman shouldn't be here." James stepped forward calmly, his voice measured but carrying to every corner. "Mr. Blackwell, I'd suggest you lower your voice immediately. You don't understand." Richard sputtered, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "She's a thief. I told you this morning. She stole from her own family. She's not qualified to be here. She's not qualified for anything." "Not qualified?" James's eyebrow rose slightly. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm extremely well aware of Miss Blackwell's qualifications. You can't possibly." "I'm also aware," James continued, his voice hardening just slightly, "that you've spent the past 3 years contacting every single employer in your county to systematically destroy your daughter's career. I'm aware that the alleged theft you keep referencing was $1,400 in required textbooks that she paid back in full, with documentation." Gasps rippled through the crowd like electricity. Richard's face went from red to white and back to red. "And I'm aware," James said, his voice dropping to something almost dangerous, "that you've been attempting to arrange your daughter's marriage to secure a business partnership, using her as a bargaining chip." The room absolutely erupted in whispers, shocked murmurs, people pulling out phones. "How do you?" Richard stammered. "Your daughter," James continued, turning slightly toward me with obvious respect, "is not just an employee of Sterling Investments." He paused, letting the silence build, letting the tension become almost unbearable. "Elena Blackwell owns 10% of this company. She's been a founding shareholder since she was 7 years old." He turned back to Richard. "Her grandmother, Catherine Sterling, invested in this company before anyone else believed in it. And she put those shares in an irrevocable trust for Elena to protect her from people exactly like you." The room exploded, whispers becoming exclamations. Phones definitely coming out now. People staring at me with completely new eyes. I looked at my father. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. He looked like a fish drowning in air. This is fraud," he finally shouted, looking around desperately for allies, for anyone who would believe him. "My mother-in-law was senile. These documents can't be legal." "The documents have been verified by 4 independent law firms," James said calmly, almost bored. "Notarized, sealed, filed with the state. There is absolutely no ambiguity here, Mr. Blackwell. I'll sue." Richard was sweating now, his carefully constructed image crumbling in real time. "I'll sue this entire company for what?" James's voice was soft but it carried. "For honoring a completely legal investment made 22 years ago? For protecting a shareholder's rights." My mother had pushed through the crowd to reach my father, her face pale. "Richard," she hissed, tugging at his sleeve desperately. "Everyone is watching. Please stop." He shook her off so violently she stumbled. "You," he pointed at me, his finger literally trembling. "You ungrateful little." He caught himself but barely. After everything I did for you. I raised you. I fed you. I clothed you. And this is how you repay me. I said absolutely nothing. Just stood there. Let him talk. Let everyone see. I destroyed your career because you needed to learn respect. His voice cracked, became almost hysterical. You needed to understand that family comes first. That daughters don't defy their fathers. The room was absolutely dead silent now. Every single eye on Richard Blackwell. Every single ear hearing exactly precisely what kind of man he was. I made you clean toilets, he screamed, completely losing control. I made sure no one would hire you. And you know what? I'd do it again. Because that's what happens when you disobey. That's what you deserve. Marcus stepped forward, his face pale, trying desperately to salvage what was left. Dad, stop. We should go. This isn't the place for. No. Richard shoved him back so hard Marcus stumbled into a table. She needs to hear this. She's nothing. She's always been nothing. I saw my brother's expression shift. He'd spent his whole life being the golden child, the heir, the one who did everything right. And now he was watching his father self-destruct in front of every business contact he'd ever need. Her grandmother was a meddling old fool. Richard continued, spittle at the corners of his mouth. And these shares don't change what she is. A thief. Failure. A complete disgrace to this family. He was panting now. Face purple. Veins bulging. Completely, utterly unraveling. No one was looking at me anymore. They were all looking at him. And they finally saw what I'd always known. The ballroom was silent except for Richard's heavy breathing. 300 people staring at my father as he stood there, having just screamed that I deserved to scrub toilets for daring to disobey him. I stepped forward to the microphone. I didn't come here tonight to humiliate anyone, I said, my voice steady and clear. I didn't come here for revenge. Richard glared at me, but he'd spent all his ammunition. He had nothing left. I came here because I spent 3 years being called a thief, a failure, a disgrace. I was blacklisted from every job in my county. I was publicly mocked for working the only position I could get. I paused. I was told that if I wanted to survive, I had to surrender my freedom to a man who saw me as property to be traded. I looked at my father. Not with anger. Not with hatred. Just with absolute clarity. The $1,400 my father calls theft was money he gave me for required textbooks. I paid back every single cent. I have every receipt, every bank record. But even if I hadn't, I continued, even if I genuinely made a mistake, does that justify 3 years of systematic sabotage? Does that justify attempting to arrange my marriage to seal a business deal?